My name is Margaret Holt. I am 68 years old. And I have a story that will make your heart beat faster than a rabbit in my garden. Imagine me, a retired seamstress with dirt under my fingernails and fire in my soul, dragging my grandson's dream through the dawn. My family, my son, his snobby wife, and her wealthy relatives, thought they could exclude me from the most important event of my grandson's life, but I had other plans. When I brought the gift, I lit the fuse. Everything changed. But let's start at the beginning, and I'll tell you everything in order. There I was, up to my elbows in my garden, wrestling with a stubborn patch of dandelions that had no business invading my marigolds. Gardening's been my lifeline since my Walter passed 4 years ago. Keeps my hands busy and my mind from wandering to the empty side of the bed. Walter was a clockmaker, always tinkering with gears and springs, and I picked up a bit of his knack for fiddling with tiny mechanisms, though I'm more at home with a needle and thread. My backyard's my pride and joy. Rows of petunias, a tomato patch that's the envy of, and a rosebush Walter planted for our anniversary. That morning the sun was high, bees were buzzing, and I was humming an old tune, thinking life was as sweet as my iced tea. Then my phone rang. I wiped the dirt off my hands, smearing mud on my favorite sunflower apron, and grabbed it. It was my son Daniel, his voice tight like, "Mom," he said, "we need to talk about Liam's wedding." I leaned against my garden spade, expecting some chatter about table settings or whether Liam's fiancée, Nora, picked the right flowers. Instead, he hit me with, "You're not invited." I froze, dirt caked under my nails, my heart dropping like a stone in a well. "Come again," I said, hoping I'd misheard. But Daniel repeated it, each word a jab. "Cassandra, Nora parents, and I decided it's best if you don't come." Cassandra, my daughter-in-law, runs an art gallery in the city, all high heels and fancy talk. Folks, they own a winery that's got them acting like they're royalty instead of grape farmers. Apparently, I'm too much for their polished plans. My crime? A blowout at Thanksgiving last year that still has me steaming. Picture that dinner. Cassandra's sleek dining room, all glass and chrome, not a cozy bone in it. I'd driven 2 hours, arms full of my homemade pecan pie, ready to celebrate with my family. Liam, my grandson, was there, all grown up at 25, with Walter's hazel eyes and a love for stargazing that we used to share on my porch swing. He's a meteorologist, always chasing clouds. Not the corporate desk job Cassandra wanted for him. Nora, his fiancée, is an event planner. Pretty as a picture but always fussing with her phone for the perfect Instagram shot. The Fosters, Simon and Clara, were there too, sipping wine like they were judging a pageant. Things were fine until Cassandra started bragging about her new gallery job. I'm a straight shooter, always have been, so when she implied my small-town life was quaint, I couldn't bite my tongue. "Not everyone needs a city job to feel important, Cassie," I said, maybe a tad sharper than I meant. "Some of us find joy in simpler things like family." The table went quiet. Clara raised an eyebrow, her lips pursed like she'd tasted bad Chardonnay. Simon muttered something about rustic charm. Liam gave me a small smile, but Cassandra's face was redder than my tomatoes. I thought we'd moved past it, but apparently no. Now, standing in my garden, phone pressed to my ear, I felt like I'd been slapped across the face with a wet dishcloth. "Why, Daniel?" I asked, my voice steady though my insides were churning. He hemmed and hawed, finally saying, "After Thanksgiving, Cassandra and the Fosters think you'd disrupt things." Disrupt? Me? The woman who raised Daniel for 25 years, who's been a grandma to Liam for 20, who taught him how to spot Orion's belt on clear nights. Liam and I were thick as thieves, always swapping stories about stars and Walter's old telescope. To be cut out of his wedding felt like they'd ripped a page from my life's book and burned it. I gripped the phone, dirt smudging the screen, and said, "I hear you, son." But inside I was a mess, hurt, anger, and a big ol' dose of disbelief swirling like a twister. Daniel mumbled an apology, but it was as hollow. "It's not my call, Mom," he said. "Cassandra and the Fosters just want everything perfect." Perfect? Without me? That betrayal stung worse. I hung up, staring at my garden, the roses blurring as tears pricked my eyes. I wasn't just uninvited, I was erased from Liam's big day, and it hurt like nothing I'd felt since Walter's funeral. After Daniel's call, I plopped into my old armchair, the one with the faded floral pattern Walter picked out because he said it matched my blooming spirit. My hands still smudged with garden dirt, clutched a mug of chamomile tea gone cold. Across the room, Walter's telescope sat on its tripod, gathering dust since he passed 4 years ago. That telescope was his pride. All polished brass and intricate gears, a clockmaker's dream. I'd spent countless evenings with him on our porch, learning how to adjust its lenses while he rambled about constellations. Now, staring at it, I kept hearing Daniel's voice. "You're not invited." My heart ached, but that ache was turning into something hotter. Pure, unfiltered rage. I set the mug down, my knuckles white, and leaned forward, replaying the call. Cassandra, with her art gallery swagger, and the Fosters, with their winery airs, had decided I was a stain on their perfect wedding plans. Liam, my sweet grandson, was Walter's spitting image. Same hazel eyes, same love for astronomy over the corporate nonsense Cassandra pushed. When he was 7, he'd climb into my lap, point at the stars, and beg for a telescope like Grandpa's. "One day, Grandma," he'd say, "I'll have a and we'll find a new star together." That memory hit me like a lightning bolt, and I realized I wasn't going to sit here and cry into my tea. Walter had a saying, "Fix it with the right tool." He'd mutter it while tweaking a broken clock or coaxing my roses to bloom. I wasn't about to beg Daniel or grovel to Cassandra and her highfalutin in-laws. No, ma'am. My tool for fixing this betrayal wasn't tears or apologies. It was revenge, served with a side of love. I decided right then to restore Walters for Liam's wedding gift. Not just to remind him of our late-night stargazing sessions, when we'd laugh about naming a star Margaret's, but to show Cassandra and the Fosters that this small-town grandma wasn't some nobody they could sweep under the rug. I got up and walked to the telescope. It was a beauty, even under the dust, brass gleaming faintly, gears waiting to turn again. I ran my fingers over its frame, my plan was forming. I'd polish that telescope until it shone like the Milky Way, fix every gear, make it a gift that'd outshine their whole snooty wedding. It wasn't just about Liam. It was about proving I still had a place in this family, no matter how much they tried to erase me. My anger wasn't just for me, it was for Liam, who deserved better than a family that had cut out his grandma. I pictured Cassandra's smug smile, the Fosters' condescending nods at Thanksgiving when I'd called out their pretension. They thought I was too much? Fine. I'd be too much in a way they couldn't ignore. I grabbed a notepad, scribbling Celestron project, in my loopy handwriting, my heart pounding with purpose. The hurt was still there like a thorn in my thumb, but it fueled me. I wasn't crafting a gift. I was crafting a comeback. The morning after Daniel's call, I was a woman on a mission, fueled by a mix of hurt and pure cussedness. I sat at my kitchen table, a chipped Formica relic from the 70s, sipping coffee strong enough. My plan was clear. Restore telescope the same model as my late husband had. My grandson Liam dreamed of as a kid when we'd stargaze on. I wanted this gift to shine brighter than the Fosters' fancy chandeliers. A reminder of our bond and a poke in the eye to Cassandra's. I dialed Roger, my old friend and a retired watchmaker who'd worked with Walter back when they fixed timepieces for half the county. Roger's got hands steady and a laugh like a foghorn, perfect for keeping my spirits up. "Roger," I said, leaning on my counter, "I need a telescope and I need it yesterday. It's for Liam's wedding, and it's gotta make Cassandra and those Foster folks their words." Roger chuckled, his voice crackling through the phone. "Margaret, you're crazier than. Those old telescope are rarer than a polite. But I'm in." I could have hugged him through the line. Roger knew gears like I knew stitches, and I needed his know how to pull this off. A couple of hours later, Roger arrived at my place. We piled into my rusty pickup and headed to Grayson's antique shop. The place was a maze of dusty lamps, chipped teacups, and creaky furniture, smelling like old wood and forgotten dreams. Grayson, a wiry fellow with a mustache greeted us with a squint. "What's a seamstress want with my wares?" he asked. I grinned, my gardening apron still dusted with dirt. "A telescope, Grayson. A Celestron, no less." He scratched his head, then led us to a corner piled with crates. There it was, a beat-up Celestron, its brass tarnished, lenses scratched like they'd been through a sandstorm, gears rusted stiff. My heart sank, but my resolve didn't. This was my diamond in the rough. Grayson wanted $700, a price that made I'd saved $800 from years of stitching wedding dresses, but that was my rainy day fund. Still, I haggled like a pro, channeling every barter I'd ever made at the flea market. Grayson, I said, hands on hips. That thing's one step from the scrap heap. I'll give you $625. He squinted harder, then countered. $675. I shot back. $650. And you throw in that old magnifying glass for Roger. I handed over most of my savings, but I felt a spark of triumph. This telescope was my ticket to showing them I wasn't invisible. Roger hefted the telescope to my truck, muttering, "This is gonna be tougher than fixing a grandfather clock in a hurricane. 2 weeks, Margaret? You're dreaming." I smirked, my anger like a fire under my boots. "Dreaming's for folks who give up, Roger. We're making this shine." As we loaded up, Grayson dropped a bombshell that made my blood boil. "Funny thing," he said, polishing a glass. "Cassandra was in here last week buying star-shaped lanterns for the wedding. Said it's a Starry Night theme, real classy." My jaw hit the floor. Cassandra, who'd never looked at a star unless it was on a wine label, was stealing the astronomy theme Liam and I loved? She hadn't even told him. She was using our thing to look good for the Fosters. That twist stung worse than nettles in my garden. I wasn't just fixing a telescope. I was reclaiming what was mine. Restoring that Celestron was like trying to stitch a wedding dress with a knitting needle, pure misery, but I was too stubborn to quit. Roger, my watchmaker pal, and I turned my garage into a workshop, dragging in card tables and Walter's old tools, their wooden handles worn smooth from his clockmaking days. My garage, usually a haven for my gardening supplies, smelled of oil and metal, with tomato seedlings shoved in a corner next to my sun hat. The telescope sat like a grumpy patient, its scratched lenses and rusted gears mocking us. I'd already spent $650 on it, nearly cleaning out my savings, but new lenses were another beast. I needed $600 more, and my bank account was thinner than my patience with Cassandra. I made a tough call and took my ruby pendant, Walter's 25th anniversary gift, a deep red stone set in silver, to a jeweler in. That pendant, a reminder of Walter's grin when he gave it to me. "Matches your fire, Maggie," he'd said. The jeweler offered $450, less than I'd hoped, and my heart twinged as I handed it over. "For Liam," I whispered, pocketing the cash. Back in the garage, Roger and I ordered lenses and gear oil, my hands shaking as I counted out the bills. My fingers, nimble from years of sewing, had to learn new tricks, polishing glass until it gleamed, aligning gears so they spun smooth as butter. Every smudge I buffed out, every creak I silenced, felt like a jab at Cassandra and the Fosters, who thought I was just a small-town nobody. Late nights blurred together, my kitchen clock ticking past midnight as I hunched over the telescope, a magnifying glass in one hand, a rag in the other. My fingers got nicked by sharp edges, leaving band-aids scattered like confetti. Roger, bless him, kept me going with his foghorn laugh and stories of fixing watches for cranky clients. I kept thinking about Liam, my grandson, Daniel and Cassandra pushing him towards some fancy office job. Memory drove me to keep going, imagining Cassandra's face, her art gallery smirk fading, when Liam saw this telescope at his wedding. Then one evening, as I rummaged through Walter's tool chest for a tiny wrench, I found something that stopped me cold. Tucked under a pile of oily rags was a folded note, yellowed with age, in Walter's neat handwriting. "Liam, age 10, it read. "Asked me to save the Celestron for him when he's grown. Says it's for him and Grandma to find stars together." My throat tightened, tears pricking my eyes. Liam had trusted us, his little heart set on that telescope, and Walter had kept that promise safe. But I didn't just keep the old telescope as a memento of my late husband. I decided to buy an exact replica and turn it into a candy. Cassandra was betraying trust by cutting me out of his wedding, erasing the bond we'd built under the stars. My hands shook as I folded the note, tucking it into my apron pocket. This wasn't just about my hurt anymore. It was about Liam, who deserved to know his grandma hadn't forgotten him. I straightened up, my resolve harder than the granite in my garden path. Every cut finger, every late night was worth it to see this through. I wasn't just restoring a telescope. I was stitching back a piece of our family that Cassandra tried to snip away. A week before Liam's wedding, I was at craft store, hunting for fine sandpaper to polish the telescope's brass. My hands were still sore from garage work, my gardening apron swapped for a faded denim jacket Walter loved. The store was a crafter's paradise. Shelves bursting with glitter, yarn, and beads, smelling like glue and lavender candles. I was poking through a bin of polishing cloths when I heard a familiar voice by the aisle of star-themed decorations. It was Nora, Liam's fiancée, her arms full of glittery star cutouts and fairy lights, her face pinched like she'd bitten a sour apple. I'd always thought Nora was sweet but a tad shallow, always fussing with her phone for her event planner job, snapping photos of table settings for social media. She was pretty with sleek blonde hair and a knack for making everything look like a magazine spread. When she spotted me, her eyes went wide like a deer caught in headlights. "Mrs. Holt," she stammered, clutching a pack of Silver Star decals. "I didn't expect to see you here." I forced a smile, my heart thudding with the memory of Daniel's call. "You're not invited." "Just grabbing supplies, Nora," I said, keeping my tone light as a summer breeze. "How's the wedding planning?" She shifted, a star falling to the floor. "It's hectic," she said, then lowered her voice. "Mrs. Holt, I'm so sorry about the wedding." Her words hit like a splash of cold water. I raised an eyebrow, my seamstress hands tightening on the cloths. "Oh?" I said, cool as a cucumber, though my insides were boiling. Nora looked at her shoes, a pair of shiny flats that screamed city girl. "Cassandra insisted," she admitted. "She said you embarrassed her at Thanksgiving, and it'd be easier without you." "Easier?" I was livid, but I kept my cool, channeling Walter's calm when he fixed a tricky clock. "How's Liam holding up?" I asked, shifting to my grandson, who'd always been my pride, with his meteorologist dreams and love for stars over suits. Nora's eyes softened. "He's swamped, forecasting weather for the county." I nodded, picturing Liam hunched over weather maps, oblivious to his family's scheming. Then came the twist that cut deeper. Nora leaned in, whispering, "Liam fought for you, Mrs. Holt. He argued with Daniel and Cassandra to invite you, said it wouldn't be right without his grandma." My heart swelled, then sank. "But Cassandra shut him down," Nora continued, her voice barely audible. "She threatened to cancel the rehearsal dinner if he kept pushing. He backed off to keep the peace." I stood there, the store's fluorescent lights buzzing, my chest tight with betrayal. Not just mine but Liam's too. Cassandra and the Fosters weren't just cutting me out, they were stomping on his wishes to make their perfect little wedding. I forced another smile, patting Nora's arm. "You tell Liam I'm thinking of him, darlin'," I said, my voice sweet as pie but my mind racing. "And good luck with those stars." I walked away, sandpaper in hand, my anger sharper than ever. This telescope wasn't just a gift now, it was a way to fight for Liam too. 3 days before wedding, I was in my garage, elbow deep in telescope parts, when my phone buzzed. It was Clara, my old teacher friend, who's got a nose for gossip sharper than my sewing shears. She dropped a bombshell. The wedding was moved up a day because Liam forecasted a storm. I had one day to finish the Celestron I'd been slaving over to spite Cassandra and the Fosters for cutting me out. Roger, my watchmaker buddy, and I went into overdrive, working like a pair of caffeinated squirrels. The telescope lenses needed replacing. They had to shine like the stars Liam loved. After replacing them, I polished them with a cloth softer than my Sunday dress, my hands shaking from too much coffee. Roger tackled the gears, his steady fingers coaxing them to spin smooth as a waltz. We painted the frame a deep indigo, a color I picked to match the night sky. My eyes burned from squinting at tiny screws, my fingers blistered from gripping tools not meant for a seamstress. "Margaret," Roger grunted, wiping sweat from his brow. "This is crazier than fixing a cuckoo clock in a tornado." I chuckled, my voice hoarse. "Crazy's my middle name, Roger. Keep going." Every ache, every sting was fueled by my anger at Cassandra's betrayal, stealing our Starry Night theme, silencing Liam's plea to invite me. I pictured her smug art gallery smile, the Fosters. During a break, I grabbed my notepad, my loopy handwriting barely legible, and wrote a note for Liam. "Dear Liam, your stars are always with you like my love. Grandma Margaret." I tucked it into my apron, imagining him reading it at the wedding, his hazel eyes lighting up like they did when he was 10, pointing at Orion's belt. That thought was worth every sore muscle. My resolve hard as the oak table we worked on. This telescope wasn't just a gift or a jab at Cassandra. It was a way to bring Liam's memories back, to fight for the love she tried to snuff out. Roger looked at me, his foghorn laugh gone quiet. "You okay, Maggie?" he asked. I nodded, my jaw tight. "Better than okay." We're finishing this and it's gonna shine. The morning of Liam's wedding, I loaded the restored Celestron into my rusty pickup, my hand still raw from polishing its brass to a starry shine. My plan was simple. Drop it at, leave my note and skedaddle before anyone saw me. I wasn't crashing the wedding, just lobbing a grenade of love to remind Cassandra and the Fosters they couldn't erase me. Dawn painted the sky pink, and I parked near a lamppost, my denim jacket smelling of paint from the garage. The telescope gleamed, its indigo frame catching the light. My note. Dear Liam, your stars are always with you like my love. Grandma Margaret. Tucked in its case. I was setting it up, heart pounding like a drum, when a voice stopped me cold. Grandma. It was Liam, jogging by in a sweaty t-shirt, his hazel eyes wide as saucers. He froze, staring at the Celestron like it was a comet. Is that a Celestron? I nodded, my throat tight, trying to keep my cool despite. Happy wedding day, Liam, I said, my voice. He rushed over, his sneakers crunching gravel, and hugged me so tight I thought my ribs might crack. Grandma, this is incredible, he whispered, his voice thick. I nearly bawled right there, my gardening apron barely hiding the tears prickling my eyes. Liam ran his hands over the telescope, grinning like the kid who'd sketched stars with me years ago. Before I could slip away, he grabbed my arm. You're staying for the wedding, he said, his tone firm as Walter's when he fixed a stubborn clock. I blinked, my plan unraveling. Liam, I wasn't invited, I said, my sass faltering. I don't want to stir trouble. His face darkened and he shook his head. I never wanted you left out, Grandma. Never. My heart swelled, but I was ready to argue when Nora appeared, her blonde hair in a messy bun, her event planner clipboard clutched tight. Her eyes widened at the telescope, sparkling under the morning light. Mrs. Holt, this is stunning, she said, then hesitated, guilt flickering across her face. That's when she dropped a bombshell that made my jaw drop. Nora leaned closer. Cassandra admitted she lied to my parents, the Fosters, about you. Said you'd ruin the wedding just to keep things smooth. Cassandra hadn't just excluded me. She'd spun a web of lies to make me the villain. Liam's face turned red, his fists clenched. She what? He snapped, then turned to me. Grandma, you're coming to the wedding. I don't care what anyone says. I stood there, the inn's roses swaying in the breeze, my mind spinning. My revenge, meant to be a quiet jab, was now a full-on showdown. Liam's insistence, Nora's confession, it all changed the game. I straightened my jacket. All right, Liam, I said, a grin creeping up. Let's see how they handle this old gal showing up. I walked toward the inn, the telescope gleaming at the entrance like a trophy, my head high as a. The wedding was a sight to behold, like something out of a fairy tale. The venue was a grand old estate, its stone walls draped in ivy, with a ballroom glowing under Nora's star-themed decorations. Twinkling lights hung like constellations, tables draped in navy linen sparkling with glitter. I sat in the back row, feeling like a fish out of water in a gray dress I'd sewn myself, its simple cotton a far cry from the Foster's winery elegance. My hands, still callous from restoring the telescope, fiddled with the hem, my gardening apron left at home for once. I was an outsider, invited at the last minute, and my heart wobbled between pride and the sting of being unwanted. Then Liam and Nora said their vows and my world shifted. Liam, handsome in a navy suit, his hazel eyes catching the light, added a line that hit me like a warm breeze. To grandmas who light up the stars, thank you for showing me the sky. My breath caught and I bawled right there, tears soaking my handkerchief, my seamstress pride be darned. The room blurred, but I saw Nora smile at me. Her event planner polish softened by something real. I'd come to make a point, but Liam's words made me feel seen like a star breaking through clouds. After the ceremony, as folks sipped champagne under the starry lights, Cassandra approached, her face tighter than a misstitched seam. She wore a sleek green dress, her art gallery poise intact, but her eyes dodged mine. Margaret, she said, voice clipped. I'm sorry for how things went. It was a bare-bones apology, like she'd rehearsed it in a mirror. I nodded, my sass holding my tongue. Appreciate it, Cassandra, I said, cool as a cucumber, though my heart still smarted. I wasn't ready to forgive, not after her lies, but I didn't want to ruin Liam's day. Then came a twist that threw me for a loop. Simon Foster, Nora's dad, sidled up, his winery swagger softened by a sheepish grin. He was tall in a tailored suit, his silver hair gleaming like his vintages. "Mrs. Holt," he said, holding out a glass of their best Chardonnay, "I misjudged you. That telescope of yours outshines our decor." Simon admitted he'd seen me as a small-town nuisance, but the telescope, polished to a starry glow, changed his tune. I grinned, my sass kicking in. "Takes more than grapes to shine, Simon," I said, and he laughed, a real one, not his usual polished chuckle. Clara Foster joined us, her silk scarf fluttering like my roses in a breeze. She offered me another glass, her eyes softer than I'd expected from a winery queen. Over sips she told me her story, about how she grew up poor in a small town and how her snobbery was a shield to fit in with rich people. "I was wrong about you, Margaret," she said, and we talked, two old gals finding common ground in hardscrabble roots. My anger eased like a knot loosening in thread. 8 months later, Liam and Nora visited my cottage, their faces glowing. They'd named their telescope Margaret Star, a nod to our stargazing days, and announced they were expecting a baby. My heart swelled bigger. Then, another twist landed in my mailbox. A painting from Cassandra, a starry night scene with a note. "I envied your bond with Liam," she wrote. Admitting her jealousy drove her to push me out. It was a peace offering, not perfect but honest. I hung the painting in my kitchen, next to Walter's clock, still mad but learning to forgive. I was able to turn things around in my favor, to prove to everyone that I am not a burden, and to fulfill my grandson's childhood dream.
Share your thoughts in the comments. Have you ever been excluded from a family celebration, like Margaret from Liam's wedding? And what steps did you take to fight for justice? If you liked the story, subscribe to the channel and give us a like.